The conversation continues here on The Explainer tonight, and we invite you to share your views with us as well. What do you think are the real issues facing Kenyans, and where do the solutions lie, even as the protests are set to begin tomorrow? Let me tell you what we know now. Schools will remain closed. That is all primary and secondary day schools in Nairobi, Mombasa, and now Kisumu as well, amongst other statements that we have heard from various government agencies and ministries today. Our conversation here focuses on the real issues facing Kenyans. We have discussed the economy, we've discussed governance issues, and that's where I want us to pick it up from. Billow Kerrow, you had something to chime in on the conversation around where we are with respect to governance.
I think our challenge for a long time has been one of governance. Even now, it's about governance. In my view, let me mention three things and you, look at it. For example, leadership, which we've just talked about. In April, when the first demonstration took place and 3 people died, and the president spoke, and you remember he said, courage is what it takes, to stand up and speak. And he also said it's what it takes also to sit down and listen. So today, many Kenyans are hoping somehow the president will again appear on national TV. And the opposition leader probably would appear and say, okay, we are, we're pulling back and there's going to be nothing. This is leadership, and that's what governance is all about. Look at corruption. Government is always telling us 30% of the taxes that are collected disappears in corruption. Another nearly 30% disappears in wastage, inefficiencies, misplaced priorities. With all that amount of money, I would have thought that any government that is coming in today would focus on how to address that, rather than just pile on more taxes. I mean, you can see what's happening in your tax, and you're asked to pay again more taxes. Recently, you remember what happened to the media. When a simple, expose on the edible oils in KNTC, the government went ballistic on the media, which is really misplaced, instead of dealing with the issues that have been raised. The other issue of governance I think that I want to mention is, of course, I agree with her on the institutional failures. Key, of course, being Parliament. Really, that has literally lost its significance. We have become, our members of Parliament have become cheerleaders and foot soldiers for the executive. Unfortunately, in times like this is the time you need Parliament. This is the time Parliament needs to have stood up and said, no, we are going to do this, we are going to do that, let us not go back. But today you see what's happening in Parliament regarding... So lastly, let me say also the bad economic policies are critical aspects of bad governance. Let me tell you. When policy is driven by vested interest. A few minutes ago we were looking at macadamia. The official stated policy of government is value addition. Then you say, we are allowing raw macadamia to be exported. Suddenly the price of macadamia collapses from 200 to 20 shillings. You're doing the same in literally many other, and you saw in the previous administration what happened in the dairy industry. Today, the cement industry, the metal industry, paper, edible oils, many of them, because of vested interests, they are facing serious problems and, risk of closures and loss of jobs. So I think when you deal with these things in the manner that you are dealing with, these are all governance issues, and this is what underpins the challenges we have in this country today. Why are we having this debt crisis? It's because of that problem. You are borrowing money, we don't see value for money. A road that would be done with 10 million is done with 1 billion shillings. So the problems are still there. And so whether you go out and bring investors or tell investors, whatever, the issue is your people. Are they feeling it? We are collecting a lot of money. Our revenues, KRA, I must applaud them. They really try their best to collect revenue. But the challenge has been how we spend our money, and there is no discussion on that. That's why the finance bill was all about raising revenue. And, and it was controversial because of the many taxes that have been, for the first time in many years, that level of taxes is really being introduced or, hiked, to make it. So I think governance is a major issue. Bad governance is our Achilles' heels in this country, and it's not changing anytime soon from the way we see it.
Yeah. Do you think there is enough talk about corruption and sealing those loopholes in the country, Diana?
Again, another governance problem, because, and you ran a story about IMF. and the current fiscal consolidation plan that we are on under IMF. And one of the things that makes it very comfortable for government to go there is IMF doesn't question issues of corruption either. Now, there are very, very many instances of fraud, misappropriation of funds that have been highlighted. We have not seen dedication and leadership from the key institutions of governance, starting from the presidency, all the way to parliament, then you can go to EACC, ODPP around corruption. If anything, in the last month, even Anglo-leasing cases have collapsed. Even Anglo-leasing that have used taxpayers' money for 20 years, 2 decades, have collapsed. They never happened, or we never investigated properly. The ones that had been reported in the recent past have also collapsed. Issues of even integrity. Most recently, an MP was caught on camera assaulting somebody, and the next day, it is everybody was delusional. We've decided to be delusional about corruption. It is crippling us. When you think about the economic policies and the environmental policy, even the forests, corruption is going to kill every single sector, everything that we have ever been proud of. I'm even worried for athletics. We've had a fair share of corruption. It is, I think this is one area we're very proud of, and we come together as Kenyans. If we were to replace the coat of arms with anything, it would be athletics. This is the one time we all cheer and root for this country. But at a time when the government posture is we are going to lead in climate adaptation and climate resilience, I do not want to go into the merits of whether logging is good or bad. But even the allocation of who can cut the mature trees is already riddled with corruption. The budgeting processes and the enactment of the now very controversial Finance Act, corruption. People were paid. There are allegations that people were paid. What will it take that we can inject somebody with the wrong medication because of corruption and be okay with it, sleep as a country? What will not perish? What will not perish if we have allowed ourselves to be okay with corruption to that particular level? And I think where we lost it in a we lost it a very long time ago when we decided to set aside the leadership and integrity chapter. But in this particular election and the formation of government, saying corruption is not a big issue, it has always been there, so we will live with it, has just now allowed those who are corrupt to come in more strongly. There are even proposals to lower the threshold of corruption-related offenses in our laws, so that then we do not waste 20 years in court over things that we can legislate out and be okay to live with. The price of corruption, this is the year we are celebrating the 2 conventions, the African one, the UN one, and even our own anti-corruption law. Is there anything to celebrate? Maybe pass more stringent laws? The culture and everything has gone, has shifted to be more enabling for corruption. The analysis of reports on cost of doing business in Kenya, corruption is now called facilitation.
The cost of doing business.
Yes. So then, if you're able to facilitate, you can do business well in Kenya. Our neighbors within the EAC are getting or are reaping better benefits from the integration, from globalization. Why? Because most of them are more serious about corruption and a value-based way of dealing with governance, with business, and so on. But for us, we are even corrupting the right to protest. Based on where we are, if we were going to the streets on the right to protest, let me use the example of the activist Julius Kamau, who goes to express himself. Would we need to close schools? No. But right now, there are notices. There are people who are protesting the cost of living. There are others who are protesting against an individual who is purported to be the one causing the loss. How do you corrupt a value? Something that is supposed to guide how we associate and assemble as a country to that particular level. You even mobilize both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza, your parliamentary leadership, so that they come and show us their muscle in corrupting the Kenyan truth of the issues that are facing us. That parliamentarians will be out there contesting how best to ensure that we Kenyans, I have protested, I have taken part in peaceful protest. No life was lost, no property was lost, and our grievances were, in some instances, they were heard, others they were not. But that is the heart of corruption, where our leaders, every single moment, is about distorting the truth of the people. When you get to that level, we are losing this particular nation. I do not even want to get into the issue of debt and what corruption has done to our debt. Mm-hmm. Okay. I've come to learn debt is the easiest revenue to steal. It's easier than taxation. So when the Auditor General says, I do not have a debt register, yet every day we know as Kenyans, we are facing these hardships because of debt. What happened? Corruption again. Mm-hmm. I don't know what statement I can use today, Yvonne, that will not have corruption again as a root cause. But that we have decided not to address.
So interesting perspective. Faith, the legal standpoint, how are we doing with the war on corruption? I know we've seen a number of withdrawals of cases, by the prosecutor, maybe, and the blame game goes on between the office of the prosecutor and the police in terms of, the level of investigations and the threshold and whether they meet that, for successful prosecution. But where are we, legally with the war on corruption? Are we making any gains, and what needs to happen?
Yvonne, your guess is as good as mine. The challenge in the war on corruption is something that we have to face as a nation and make noise about it. Because when you look at also the kind of cases that were being withdrawn right after election, and that's something that the Law Society raised concern to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. Because if you'd see the number of cases, it either meant two things. One, either the Director of Public Prosecution was also corrupt initially when they were filing those cases, or two, he's incompetent in his office. And those are questions that we raised, and of course the blame game went to the DCI on the same. But, the pertinent concern even that we have as members of the public is that when investigations are carried out, we want to know that credible investigations are carried out, one, and that two, there ought to be a procedure before you even withdraw. There must be an explanation. You're using taxpayers' money to run your offices. So we need to know why those cases are being withdrawn and on what basis. What investigations were placed before prosecution was initiated. And because the concern would be that tomorrow the government can use the same measures against you if you do not play ball or you're not in the right place with the government. A concern that you ran a story today on the National Police Service has withdrawn security for Mama Ngina, amongst other leaders of opposition. Now, the concern is that when we have this conversation about independent institution, the National Police Service, headed by the Inspector General, should be independent. So if they're independent and they have not withdrawn the security for the others, on what basis are they withdrawing security for only one set of members who are ordinarily given that protection? So it means that either this institution therefore is not independent and have decided to join sides in a certain political fight, other than adhering to their constitutional mandate and do their work to give protection to members of the public. But stemming on corruption, I also look into the judiciary as well. Because when Parliament fails and the executive, of course, absolute power corrupts absolutely. But the only stronghold that we can lay our faith and our hope in is the judiciary. So if we find that cases are being, people are running to the courts to try and stop corruption that is happening, and we find like a bit of games are being played also at the judiciary, then it raises concern that where will we have hope? Because my greatest concern is that if the judiciary, which is the last stop and the last hope for members of the public, is also involved in corruption, and we do not have the highest offices talking about this corruption, then it means then members of the public have no hope as to where they will run to. And as the Law Society, these are areas that we said we're going to take a hard stand on. We're not going to allow the last hope for members of the public, being the judiciary, to get involved in blatant corruption. We will raise and we will follow up on any judges and judicial officers that they go through the Judicial Service Commission for cases that we're able to establish of corruption, because the way our country is running, our only hope right now lies with the courts.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's an interesting one. Dr. Kerrow, we've talked about corruption and misappropriation of funds, and basically how we use the funds we collect. The ones we get from taxes, the ones we get from loans, be they domestic or external. And this is where we talk about tax collection, but there's also tax efficiency. How do you think we are doing with respect to making sure that the taxes we collect actually do the work that they're supposed to? And maybe, if I can use the term, a return on investment. I mean, we pay taxes, hoping we can get back services and, grow our economy. How are we doing with, efficiency of the funds that we have, in the kitty?
Today, if you spoke to any Kenyan, they will tell you that their problem is not paying taxes. They are happy and they are willing to carry their fair share of the tax burden. But their problem is, what do they get in return? We are told that I am in several community groups and we deal with the kids. And recently we were discussing about some kids from our village who were told that they are not able to be in school. And my question was, but I thought it's free. And they're like, who said it is free? It is free. It's not free. And they counted for me so many levies which are necessary. They counted for me the cost of getting a kid go through CBC, and I realized it is not free. Yet you're being told primary school is free. So you talk about health. I don't even want to go there. I'm on record on this station talking about how terrible it is. Talk about, the thing is, you are paying taxes. What are you getting in return? The input, output, and the efficiency in terms of spending these taxes. Can we do things differently? Why do public officers in a country that is struggling like Kenya be driving high-end vehicles at a time like this? And then I felt a little bit, should I say mocked, when they removed that smoker only during the budget reading and they returned it. And I feel like this is, I don't know. I don't know what to call that, but I thought it was a mockery to Kenyans that, yes, we know it is wasteful to drive gasless. We know it is not right, and we believe it is not right, but we keep doing it anyway. So those kind of things, really, they become very much inefficient uses of resources. And if we continue the way we are, because you are putting emphasis in the collection, but you're not using, but there's no emphasis on how it's going to be spent. And just like he said, we come back to this economic principle about how people form expectations. There is the rational expectations, there is the empirical expectations, whereby the empirical expectations, you form expectations based on what you have experienced. You've experienced taxes that don't help you, and therefore you look for ways in which you can protect yourself and cushion yourself against all these challenges that are going to come, because at the end of the day you think like you are on your own. In terms of education, in terms of healthcare, in terms of even transportation, you are alone. And so you try to cushion yourself in ways that you may protect your interests, and that will affect the interests of the government. It's no more human instinct, self-preservation. As opposed to if there were rational expectations whereby, and those are based on trust, like she said. Trust makes conducting business, conducting relations cheaper and easier. If you trust your government, when they say the cost of living will go down within the first 3 months, you believe they'll do it. We are going to solve the issue of agriculture in the next 1 year, you believe they do it. If that is the case, then you have no reason to hoard, to keep too much to yourself, because you trust and you believe your government. So in this case, many Kenyans make their expectations in the empirical way, what we've already experienced, because what we've learned, what we've seen, we believe is what's going to happen again and again. And unfortunately, we are not wrong in expecting that. So the point is, the government has to change the way people form expectations by conveying the message that, look, we are for you. We are working for your interests. We listen to you. Because believe you me, the biggest investment that this government can make is in the people of Kenya. It's basically in the people of Kenya. If they want to go far, if they want to govern without ASOS, make the people your friends. Make the people want to support you. Make the people believe that they are on our side. So I think that is where the challenge is.
Okay, and maybe one of those things would be in some of the policies or measures they implement in the short term, medium term, and long term. What do you see as the options that are available, considering where we are now economically?
This is where we are. From a purely economic perspective, we are rolling back some of the greatest gains we have achieved as a country. If you look at the Financial Access Survey of 2019, it says that access to finance was at 87%. That's very high penetration of financial services to the Kenyans. Now, if you look at the way interest rates are going, and then they're talking of mergers of banks, we are saying hello to Shylocks and other predatory lenders, because that gain is at the brink of being lost if we proceed the way we are saying. We are also losing the gain on climate, the lifting of the logging ban. Did we achieve 30% forest cover yet? That was the target. And here we are. We are rolling back on climate gains, which is a very fundamental aspect of sustainable development. And we're also rolling back the gain on a vibrant service sector that drives this economy up to 80%. If you talk about all this rising inflation, the fuel costs and all that, even the transport and the tourism sector, which are the biggest drivers of this economy, they are getting affected in the negative. So that is where we are. What do you want to see in the immediate short term, like yesterday? Sound macroeconomic policies and sound prediction of what is going to happen in government. We don't want to wake up to these statements of like what I heard last night about the mergers in banks, what you hear about the logging bans. We don't want to hear that. We want to hear soundness in terms of macroeconomic policies and soundness in terms of reasoning and being in touch with the Kenyan people. Like yesterday, we need that. In the medium term, we cannot escape technology. We are talking about farmers and middlemen and farmers being exploited. Young people of Kenya come up with technology to link farmers to markets directly. And as consumers, let us accept and embrace technology. It's going to it's going to free a lot of people, it's going to increase efficiency, and it's going to help a lot of business people, including farmers especially, get their fair share, and therefore we expect that the cost of living is going to go low. Mm-hmm. In the medium term, we need a sectoral transformation policies. The agriculture sector cannot continue the way it is. I mean, 2023, we are still talking about fertilizer subsidies as a solution to production. Yet history and research is full of those failed cases. We have had fertilizer subsidies year in, year out. We are still stuck. And even now, we are still saying we've got the magic bullet fertilizer subsidy. Where is the evidence? The point is, we need to have a transformation that helps farmers. You see, in economics, we say that if you grow your crop this season, like the macadamia people, when it was 200 shillings a kilo, they invested and they grew a lot of it. Now it has gone down to 20 shillings. Who's going to farm macadamia? Cut it, burn it, firewood. It's not helping, it's causing a shed. So the point is, let us show farmers where the money is. And that will increase production in a sustainable way. And that will bring the cost of living down automatically. And how do we do that? It's about looking at what we know it is the cartels, we know it is the middlemen. Why don't we have policies that work? And most importantly, can we have leaders who are governed by very strong morals and ethical values in a way that you believe it is wrong to take advantage and come up with a company that you know is going to cause harm in a particular sector. So that's a long term and a medium, some kind of a change, re-examining our values. And I always say, no matter how many cars I have in my house, for example, I can only drive one at a go. I can only wear one pair of shoes at a go. And I can only live up to this long. Why do we need that much? So those are things we need to re-examine our values in the long term, and this country will never be the same again.
Okay. Billow Kerrow, where do you see the solutions in the short term, in the medium term? And should Kenyans brace themselves for tough times before things get better? Like, what can we reasonably expect?
You know, we have been asked to brace for tough times by government repeatedly. And we have no reason to doubt their resolve to make things difficult, you know. But I think there are things the government can do in the short term. One of the things that I expected government to do, look at the true situations of Sri Lanka and Zambia, which were in a situation like ours. The Sri Lankan administration developed thick skin like ours. They didn't move quickly, and they went into a crisis. Zambia was defaulting on debt, the same situation like ours, worse situation than even ours. But they went into a serious discussion to try and renegotiate their loans. That was where they put on their focus, to scheduling of loans, to make it easy for them to live another day. You know, but they did not go full blast to try and collect more taxes. In fact, if you look at their budget recently, they actually reduced corporation taxes. You know, but so I would have thought that the first thing this government did, because the debt is the biggest pressure, was to really go out full blast with the friends they have in the international community to try and get, reshedding of our notes, to try and reduce the burden of loan redemptions or payments, That, I thought, was the first thing that they need to do. Second, I think, given the current economic situation we're in, people who are hungry in this country, they keep repeating, government, that 4 or 5 million Kenyans are without food. Recently, the economic survey revealed a significant percentage of Kenyans, between 15 to 25% of Kenyans who are, having serious food security, facing hunger. So what I would have thought that government would not really, even today, even now with the current situation which we are in, they have time to go back on some of those tax policies. Because two things can't happen. You cannot have IMF and the love of IMF and the love of Kenyans together in the same heart. You can't. They're incompatible. You have IMF, you lose the people. That one I can tell you anytime. The history is replete with that kind of circumstance in the rest of the world. So I would say the government can reduce some of the taxes, really to make the cost of living, cheaper for people. That is the most fundamental thing that they can do even today and tomorrow. And it's the third thing I want to suggest, which the government, I think, can do is to really listen to Kenyans more than they listen to investors outside. Don't spend time running around the world looking for other investors. You have investors in this country, businesses, which are feeling the pain of the policies that you have introduced. You have no regard for your own businessmen. You can't sit with industry. You can't sit with your business community to find solutions to the challenges that they face. And and these are the people who are employing, Kenyans. These are the people who are paying your taxes. These are the people generating all the revenue. But you disregard people. I've seen a whole CS walk out on investors in his office, and literally every day we're seeing on TV people being called. Farmers are called cartels. Petroleum companies are being called cartels. Manufacturers in various sectors, you're a cartel. Anytime nobody likes your face, you're a cartel. You can't. And the same, and you profile businesses officially on the official websites of the strategic whatever communications in State House and government ministers in Senate in public, profiling companies that are doing business legitimately in this country. You can't then encourage people to be productive really in a situation where you are the one who is undermining. I think what government needs to do is really have that respect, have the value for businesses. These are the people who generate income. For the people who are mamambogas, don't always threaten. Every day there are new things coming up, levies, taxes. We are going to change license plates. We are going to change this. We are going to put dashboards on your matatus. Do this. Everything is about cost. There's no regard to the cost on the lives of the people. People are suffering. So I think there's time to step back and say, no, we can defer some of these things. Let economy recover. Let people try and get jobs. For me, that is the most important thing that this government needs to do at this time. That's my comment.
Yeah, and having sat, at the Senate, what would be your thoughts around the role of the legislature in the country being the body that provides legislation oversight as well as representation? Not just this time around, but even before, we've heard about the legislature being captured by the state and, not representing the people, but the interests of the executive. What are your thoughts on how important Parliament is? And
I think Parliament has a significant role, let me tell you. Of course, you've seen what happened in the last Finance Act. I mean, thousands of people presented, their views. You guys were doing the count. But when the final draft was done, 90% or 95% of those views were ignored. But that is the opportunity Parliament had to listen and to weigh in and tell the executive, no. People are saying no. Let us not do this one. Let us not do this one. The second is, for example, what's happening in Senate now, which I really commend. For example, this Senate committee hearings on the energy sector, on the independent power production and so forth. This is critical because the main challenge to any government is productivity. If there's no competitiveness in your production, you cannot really compete in the international, community. You can't. And our problem has been we have been losing businesses. Companies have relocated, multinationals have moved out. Why? Because our cost of production is very high. And the key thing is energy. power particularly. So when I see Senate looking at what is the problem with these independent power producers, why are we having all these charges? Why is KPLC charges going up 60-70%? We had it the other day, now they want again to review, and then with all these fuel charges and so forth. So I think they have an opportunity to review and to say, no, this one we can't have. Call EPRA and tell them you can't review the rates. Because unless we really critically say no, because everything in Kenya, let me tell you, there's vested interest. IPPs, independent power, President Uhuru formed a committee, you remember task force. They come up with, those are professionals, by the way. That team had very good people in that team. They came up with specific actions that can be done to deal with that matter, including renegotiating some of those things, how to do it. Nothing of that was implemented. Why? Because there are people who are vested interest in that in government, and they'll simply say, no, watch it. We had a whole government ministry told you run power and lighting. They went there, a whole cabinet team was running power and lighting for quite a while. I mean, it's not the way to do business. So I think Parliament has a role, particularly in terms of policy, in terms of legislation, to try and talk to executive and tell them, no, this one you can't do. Especially when these things are being introduced by ministers on the roadside. You know, I'm going to have this charge, you're going to pay this, you're going to pay that, we are going to demand. Some of these things they should not allow. And they should know that they elected, the people down there, the ones who are suffering. They should say, no, this is going to hurt the people. I think if you use that scale of the impact of every action of government on the people, you would find that equilibrium and say, no, this one is counterproductive. Let's not have it.
Yeah, and that's where you balance the scales. One of the things, you know, as we're talking about all of these issues, those who are protesting are saying, you know, they have a right to express themselves on, you know, the state of the nation, the state of the economy. And then there's the big, you know, conversation on how to protest and who's responsible for what in terms of damages and, you know, the organizers of the protests. So now that we have you here, you know, from the LSK, tell us what the law says about how we should protest, because that's a huge conversation right now.
So Article 37 allows Kenyans to be able to picket, to assemble, to raise their concerns in a peaceful manner. Ideally, the Constitution provides a framework upon you have that right to come and voice, to raise your concern, raise your voice, but it's cautioned in a way that it should be peaceful. Now, the question now varies is that what happens when it's not peaceful, and two, who should take responsibility for it?
Yeah.
Now, we were having this conversation, and one of the speakers raised the fact that while others are coming to demonstrate and raise their concerns, others are coming to, you know, carry out other extra...
Yeah. I mean, there's those in society who would always want to take advantage of a situation. Certainly.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
There's criminal elements everywhere.
Exactly.
So who's responsible for that?
Now, under the Constitution, I think it's only fair to say that those who exercise their right to assemble and picket outside the ambit of Article 37, which is engaging in crime, stealing, looting, destruction of property, there's a legal provision in how you should deal with them under the penal code. So find those individuals that have been involved in such circumstances and hold them accountable. Now, it is the responsibility and duty of the government to ensure that they provide security during any demonstration, both for those who are engaging in the demonstration and those who are not engaged in the demonstration, to also protect their property and their right to continue in their general business. Now, it would be, in my purview, it would be unfair to levy this responsibility in those engaging in a protest, because it is inevitable. There are those who will go to carry out to do their own other things. Now, I would put case in point the Northlands, what happened in the Northlands. Could you hold the Azimio leaders liable for what happened in the Northlands if they're the same leaders who are engaging in the protest? Others came there to purposely destroy that particular property. And concern was raised Even from the Kenya Kwanza leaders, they also raised thereafter concern when there was an uproar on the same. So would you say that those who led the demonstration, who are not even there, should be held liable for the damage in the Northlands? Now, the responsibility, I don't know why we are jumping here and there, because the responsibility remains with the government. It is your responsibility. We have the National Police Service led by the IG. It is his responsibility to ensure that there is peaceful, he provides security, and also not to, in event that there are those who engage in other activities, to have them arrested. Then place them before the trial process, give them a fair trial, and let the courts decide their fate, but they would have had their day in court. And that would be the best example on how they should be dealt with. I think it would be quite unfair then to place that onus and responsibility on anyone who says they want to carry out a demonstration, that they should be held liable. Now, right now, there was a time that people were saying that there's no actual opposition in this country. That both government and opposition were ideally in government. Now, in case in point, if members of the public rose up and we are having a social transformation and a revolution, and members go out in the streets, as Bill has said, for the first time, you've seen counties that you've never seen engage in demonstrations spontaneously coming out to demonstrate with no exact political leader behind them. Now, who will you hold responsible for any violence that arises thereafter? And so we must pinpoint the responsibility where it lies.
And where does it lie?
It lies with the government. They must be held responsible to ensure peaceful demonstrations, provide security. When you say that...
And when the peace is breached, then
arrest
the process
them.
you...
Yes, there are legal provisions that allow you to arrest those who are in breach of the peace. And something that also has to be clear is that protecting property does not mean taking life. There is no excuse to use live bullets. And also, you also ran news where members of the opposition have also raised concern that some protesters were shot on the back when they were running away. So what was the danger that you were trying to stop as they are running away? So the IPOA must rise up and must carry out investigations. They must be accountable as an independent office and tell Kenyans who are the officers responsible for the deaths of these people, and they must be held to account, to be held personally responsible for their actions. Yeah.
Diana, there's calls to, for a ceasefire on both sides of the divide, stand down, everybody, talk, dialogue, let's find a way forward. Will that solve the problems that Kenyans are facing? Or rather, after they talk, then what? Let's imagine the protests happen tomorrow, or they don't happen tomorrow, and maybe they're called off on Thursday and Friday. So we call it off. Great. Solution, are we done? Is that, are we good now?
Wow, no, far from good. And yes, it wouldn't solve the current crisis that we are in. And I think one is the fact that, let me just comment a bit on the earlier issue of protest and what happens. I think the government still has an obligation, even in the current circumstances, with whatever intel they have, to ensure the highest enjoyment of freedom of association and assembly. That remains a government obligation, along with all other rights. We are a democracy, and that particular Article 37 is at the core of democracy for both government, opposition, and we, the sovereign Kenyans. Now, the dialogue and the talks that are being called, what are they about? Who has framed the issues? They are bipartisan, 2 people out of 50 million. Not another dialogue. If it is just for the ceasefire and to allow governance, good governance to kick in. That could now kickstart the process of the required transformation that we need out of this crisis. But if we create a team of negotiators between two political formations that currently are opposing each other, and within no time they will be together, and then they will define who needs to be out and get us into this problem again. No. And I think the political class needs to stop capturing citizen spaces. If you recall the interpretation that was given by our court around the BBI process, political leaders have their spaces for policy making, for making decision, for leading this country that is very, very different from we the sovereigns. Actually, around protest, I think I have a greater right than these political leaders. And our law, actually, I gather, for them they're allowed. They don't need to issue a notification. Any elected leader, when they're on a meet and greet, they don't need a notification. So can they go meet and greet, get the views, and take them to the right place, the assembly? If you're in cabinet, take it to your civil servant. But the street and where we voice our issues as the people of Kenya need to be safeguarded. At this point, who will help us strengthen the governance institutions that are required? Will the bipartisan or the negotiation restore the place of parliament in a presidential system of government? Already, all these declarations that we have seen from the executive, from the logging of mature trees, the higher education directive, a whole policy directive that has not been questioned in parliament, proposals to turn around our health system. Parliament is mute or joining us in the streets. That's very, very problematic. I think it is time we defined. And if at all we are at a place where our governance institutions don't work, it is time to get people, experts in different areas. Get Daktari here to lead us on the macroeconomic policy that can get us out of where we are. Get Yvonne to lead us in how to communicate to each other so that Kenya retains the honor and dignity that all Kenyans deserve. So I think it is time we took the phrase, it's always out there, we are fixing this country.
Are we?
It is time we made it a Kenyan creed that is believed and embraced. But that can only come from the leadership, particularly the Kenya Kwanza leadership led by the president, realizing we are in a crisis and deploying crisis leadership by ensuring that we have the highest levels of transparency and accountability to inspire Kenyans to come together and fix the nation. While at it, as we fix it, be very open to participatory practices. Yvonne, I was in Trans Nzoia a week ago, and I learned in that county, they realized the border annual fee of 3,600 is never paid. They slashed it to 500 annually. Their own source revenue went up by just listening to people. They give you solutions. We are the Kenyan people. We are the ones who will die here. Most of us ordinary Kenyans do not even have any other nationality. At best, we only have a relative in Uganda or Tanzania or Somalia. So it is time that we ensured we have in leadership that inspires Kenyans to come and help us fix. Well, at it, because the Constitution created governance institutions that were well thought out, and we had come out of a greater crisis. So those ought to be strong enough. Can we now rebuild those institutions and stop any level of interference? The executive should not interfere with parliament or the judiciary. The last parliamentary group meeting that was in State House, in one of the clips by the media houses, there was a statement to the fact that the executive will speak to the judiciary and tell them to listen to why they must act in a certain way around the Finance Act. Surely, please, let us ensure that institutions are respected and people have confidence in those. All these allegations that we have had from different oversight institutions, particularly the horizontal ones, can we see measures to redress those and appoint where the leadership has affected the confidence to a great extent, it may be change it so that we now tell Kenyans, we are truly, I'll keep using it, we are fixing this country.
Fixing this country.
Yes, by restoring the institutions that are required. And then finally, mutual respect for institutions like political parties. The interference that we have seen in parliament with the formation and how parties are elected is very, very problematic. But it is even worse how we, the people, shareholders or not, are not respected in this particular government. Part of how we fix this is bringing everybody back, everybody feeling valued and listened to by creating that particular culture of mutual respect. I'll keep insisting it is something that the public relations of the Kenya Kwanza government did. The traders that I work with felt they would be listened to. But now, they feel tossed out, thrown away. So those are the three things that I hope we can work on. But ultimately, I have seen the religious leaders say, let them talk. It is not them talk. Let us talk continuously about Kenya and create a framework that will ensure we do not have this either 1 year down the line, 1 month, or 4 years to come. That finally we can say we steered this country
in the right direction.
Prosperity, yes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot we can say about where we want the country to go. I want us to hear some feedback in the spirit of listening and putting the people first. Let's get some feedback now as we close the show. And here is one. Mtumishi Murigi says, the long-term solution to economic situation is not tax, but cutting the wage bill by the government officials. Let MPs, PSs cut their salaries to a maximum of 500,000 shillings, and we will not need to borrow anything. Wanja Douglas says, running a nation requires goodwill from all the stakeholders, the Kenyans, the political elite, the counties, the opposition, the workers, and the institutions. Managing all their interests requires godly wisdom and not a political party. Interesting. Edwin Mikel says, Dr. Joyce is giving practical solutions, Dr. Joy Kerrow is giving practical solutions for the government at the moment to exercise expansionary measures to ease on the liquidity. You increase the lending base ratio, float the bonds, and remove subsidies. At the same time, there is no disposable income. And then there is Nyakweba, who says the main problem is most people have nothing to eat, nothing in their pockets, and the indicators are only showing bad situations ahead, encompassed with disappointments from the promises made. Just listening will settle everything. All right. Ekesa Austin says, the demo has little to do with the cost of living. What about the acceptance of election results? You need to talk about this. Then there is Crispinus Adams says, withdrawing Mama Ngina's security doesn't offer any solutions. Withdraw the Finance Act, reduce levies and taxes on fuel and electricity. This will save businesses and create jobs that will in turn result in increased revenue collection. And then we have Mike Mtambo says, do we really have to go deepest low possible for us to rise up economically? Neither the government nor the opposition have our interests at heart. Again, it's not about us, the Mwananchi, but it's about them. Let's not be duped again. And finally, Vicky Nyagamutai says, the discussion is really good. Great panel. I feel like my thoughts have been aired on many aspects, especially governance, corruption, and the Finance Act 2023. Thank you for that, Vicky. All right. So that is where we leave it. Can I give one sentence? One. Is that possible? To have just one sentence from each of you? Okay, maybe two, but one. Let me start with you, Faith.
I would say that the president he remains the president of the nation. And it's quite important that he looks at and feels the heartbeat of the nation. The Law Society is offering the expertise of its members as mediators. Let us have a dialogue that encompasses the peoples of Kenya. Listen to the heart of the nation and obey the laws as are there. Thank you.
Thank you. The economist in the house.
Thank you. I would say that Kenya is known for, Kenyans, not Kenya. Kenyans are known for their resilience, for their hard work. We have come from far. And I ask us as a nation, together with the government and the people of Kenya, to really look at what is important to us, safeguard that. It doesn't matter what is going to cost. What's important must be protected. And really, I urge the government to listen to Kenyans and just do the right thing by them.
Diana?
Kenya is our home. Kenya is needed by the world, by Africa. To our leaders in government, you owe it to us to inspire us to protect this country. And I will end by saying, please, whatever happens in the next 3 days and 1 month, ensure that our dear country and all Kenyans wanastahili heshima. Let nobody in the world or in this country end up mocking Kenyans because of bullish behavior or leaders who are just out to win and stroke their egos.
Billow Kerrow?
Very strong words. No, I think I can only call on the, I agree, the only home we have is this one. I think the situation we're in, we call for unity of this country. We call on all the Kenyans, those who want to protest and those who are out to stop the protests, to exercise maximum restraint and to really appreciate the lives and properties of every other Kenyan. I think things can spiral out of control because of a small thing tomorrow. So we want to urge all Kenyans to really rise to the occasion and look at the greater need of this country is our unity. That is what is most important. And without peace, we will not have a nation. So in spite of all the challenges, I think we must keep peace. And I want to urge everyone, particularly those who are organizing the demonstrations, to exercise maximum restraint so that we can have peace in the country.
Thank you very much, Billow Kerrow, Diana Gishengo, Dr. Joy Kiru, and Faith Odhiambo for your time with us here tonight and for raising the issues that are facing the country. And thank you too for watching and for your feedback. Stay safe, everybody. Have a good night. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.